Okay, so just from looking at the screenshot, can you guys tell me what operating system this is? And we're going to do a few of these, so maybe leave your answers in the comments below before I reveal them. Despite me covering up some of the hints that have the logos and the name of the OS/company, I'm guessing that literally every single person watching this video will get this one right. What about this one? This is another one I'm guessing every single person will get right from just the screenshot alone. Alright, what about this one? This is another one, especially for your Linux user, that you should get right just from looking at it. Okay, what about this one? Okay, this is slide 4. Let's go to the next one. This is where it's going to get hard. This is slide 5. Can you tell me what Linux distro this is? And here's slide 6. Can you tell me what Linux distro this is? Okay, now the last one is for the really dedicated Linux users who know ball, but there are identifiable elements of this Linux distro, unlike the other ones. Can you tell me what this one is? Now, let's reveal the answers. You already know that this one's Windows 11. You already know that this one's Mac OS. You already know that this one's Ubuntu, most likely, and you probably already know that this one's Elementary OS. And if you know ball, then you know that this is Garuda Linux. However, I'm guessing you didn't get this one or this one right. Notice a common pattern? These ones are running GNOME, and they aren't doing full crazy patches to GNOME like Ubuntu is. This one right here is stillOS GNOME, and you probably only knew that if you are running stillOS GNOME and you remember what the default wallpaper looks like on the latest version, because they do change it every single version and it's a different wallpaper per desktop. So that one I almost guarantee you didn't get right if you don't use stillOS GNOME. But this one right here, it's a little bit more common of a distro, but this is Manjaro GNOME. And the only hints you get are the wallpaper here and that there's dash to dock with a icon pack. And then like I said, this one's Garuda. This distro is more obscure, but if you've ever used a Garuda system or seen a YouTube video on a Garuda system, you know what distro this is. The point I'm trying to make is all of the ones that you are very likely to get have a distinct brand identity with the Linux distro, and if you're looking at a screenshot, you're able to tell based on just how the distributions / operating systems in the case of Windows and Mac OS look. Whereas with the closer to stock GNOME distros, there's basically no brand identification at all that you can tell in the screenshot. And this is a huge marketing problem for these distributions. You want to be able to tell what distribution someone is running based on the screenshot. And with that, GNOME has killed distro identity with Libadwaita. And it's really stupid to me because the fix that I'm going to show later in the video is very, very simple. Now, let's first talk about how did we get there. Well, back in the GDK 3 days, theming was a complete mess. The thing is, GDK, they have something called a CSS style sheet. If you've ever done any web development at all, you know how CSS works. This is how you style an HTML document, essentially. Now, GDK apps internally also use CSS in order to actually render out a style sheet that the apps are going to use. And the default theme, back in the day, it used to be called Adwaita, but now it's a separate thing. Now it's just the default GDK theme, because Adwaita is something else now. Now, one of the things that GDK allows you to do is replace the internal CSS with your own CSS. So this would allow for custom themes on Linux, where you're able to customize everything on the app level, from the colors to how the buttons look and things like that. However, the thing to note about this is GDK CSS themes were never actually a fully supported thing. It wasn't something that you're supposed to do. So because of that, it is very common to just have random bugs and problems with a custom CSS GDK theme. So I have an example here from OMG Ubuntu. Here's an example of GDK themes breaking Elementary OS. And then here's an example of the default theme that used to be in Pop OS breaking one of the GNOME apps. Now, as a result, a bunch of Linux app developers ended up making the please don't theme our apps open letter. So this is mostly GNOME developers, but they basically say GDK style sheets can make applications look broken and even unstable. Icon themes can change icon metaphors, leading to interfaces of icons that don't express what the developer intended. And then app icons are the identity of an app. Changing an app's icon denies the developer the possibility to control their brand. And then this open letter also links to this article called Restyling Apps at Scale. This actually reiterates what I just said, that these are CSS style sheets and they were only ever meant to be used by platform and app developers. However, as this article notes, some people, including major distributions, have been using custom style sheets as a hacky approximation of themes for so long now that nobody even remembers they're not a real theming API. And then it shows this example of Ubuntu's theme just breaking a older version of the app G Radio. And it shows a bunch of examples here of just things being broken. Now, this letter does specify if you want to tinker with your own system, that's fine. but they're just saying they're unsupported. The main problem that this open letter has is distributions/platforms, theming apps, and then breaking things. Now, as a result of this problem, the GNOME team created a library called Libadwaita. Now, Libadwaita does a few things. Mainly, it is a set of a bunch of different widgets that basically implement GNOME's human interface guidelines to a T. So instead of having to do stuff manually, you can just implement these widgets very easily. And this also replaced libhandy, which is what the library was back in the day for GDK to make adaptive applications. So this basically lets Libadwaita applications be able to easily adapt to things like mobile screens or just very small screens. Or small windows, and things of that nature. But the most important technical detail that created a lot of controversy and drama in the GNOME space is that this actually hard codes GNOME's Libadwaita theme. Out of the box, distributions cannot customize the look of Libadwaita GNOME apps. But the reason that they did this is just to make it so that people can't break their apps anymore unless they do it themselves in terms of tinkering with their system. But distributions are no longer able to break their apps by enforcing a bad style sheet. So with this now, the entire ecosystem is now able to look consistent and fit GNOME's human interface guidelines thanks to Libadwaita. And that is a really good user experience. That is actually the full reason that I use GNOME on my computer, because I don't care about theming my applications. I just want GNOME to work, and GNOME apps just work. And they're very consistent. The big problem that this introduces on a platform level is that now the only things a platform can change in Libadwaita apps without patches are fonts and accent colors. And if you're on a non-GNOME desktop such as KDE, these apps will just look completely out of place. And because of this, Ubuntu, Manjaro, and Zorin OS have all patched Libadwaita, and these patches don't work on Flatpak, which means now Flatpak Libadwaita apps look different than native Libadwaita apps. Linux Mint did a full fork of Libadwaita and to something called libadapta, which allows custom style sheets on Libadwaita widgets. And System 76, as a result of some Twitter drama, just full out decided to ditch GNOME and build their entire own desktop environment, ditching GDK completely and using a different toolkit called Iced. So as I said earlier, all of the most recognizable distros have their own look. In my opinion, for marketing a Linux distro, it is very important that a distro is able to be recognized inside of its screenshots. That way, when I'm doing something on YouTube in my own distro, stillOS, I don't get 100 comments asking me, what distro am I running? What distro am I running? Now that I'm joking about that, I guarantee you I'm gonna go and get these comments now in my comment section. But now in order to do that, you have to resort to patches or other methods of having your own branding, such as just a wallpaper. But of course, most people switch their default wallpaper to something else. You can still set icon themes, I guess, but I actually agree with the stop theming my apps people that apps also need to have their own brand identity. So on my distro, I do not theme icons. I guess you can use your own font, but most distributions are not gonna develop a font, and all the good ones are already taken by another distribution. But I'm not Ubuntu or Red Hat just able to full out develop my own font. Basically, the only other crutch you have is just changing the layout of GNOME, which is what I did for stillOS. I didn't do this for branding. I did it to make GNOME's UX a little bit more beginner friendly, but the branding part is definitely a benefit of it. Other than that, you're kind of out of options. But even this, if you wanted to use this solely for branding, if you're on a rolling release distro, GNOME can just completely randomly update and break your stuff. And an example of this is when GNOME 40 came out, which is a complete overhaul of GNOME. Garuda Linux Upstream inherited the new version of GNOME, and it completely broke their style sheet. And so with this, GNOME distributions just have a much harder time of building a brand identity for their Linux distro. I guess as an upside, there aren't really any more distros that are just Ubuntu with a theme or Arch with a theme. At least there aren't any GNOME-based Arch or Ubuntu for theme distros anymore, pretty much. That said, there's a very easy solution to distro branding that should be able to please pretty much everyone involved, and that is a recoloring API. So with this, just through color, I can have my own distinct brand identity for my Linux distro based on how everything looks, without having to maintain a style sheet that can actually break things. In fact, it would be even easier for us to maintain, since we're just maintaining a file full of color codes rather than an entire CSS style sheet. Now, the foundation for this already exists. If we go over, one of the features Libadwaita has for developers is named colors. So there's a bunch of different colors we can use just by using a CSS class like -- accent blue or destructive color or even window background color. And so all GNOME would have to do in order to expose this API is add some easy way for distro developers to override these colors. And then if you properly implement your own CSS changes, if you use these named colors yourself instead of forcing certain color codes, then no app breakages whatsoever. They even have palette colors right here. So if you wanted to make like some sort of item in your app yellow, for example, instead of hard coding yellow, you can just do a yellow palette color right here. And then the distro can set some sort of shade of yellow that fits the style that the distro is going for, and boom. Now you can actually do this yourself already. So if you go into your home directory and then .config and then /gdk-4.0, you can add a gdk.css file that contains a bunch of your own named colors right here. So I just found a random one on the internet, a Dracula theme, dragged it in here. This theme actually has a bunch of extra patches that I don't want. I only want the colors. Okay, I found a different one that emulates Breeze Dark. Let's see if it works. Now, if I reopen GNOME Text Editor, which by the way is a Libadwaita app, most of the UI now is using the Breeze color theme now. In fact, yes, the inside text editor isn't, but that's because that's like a separate theme from Libadwaita here, as you can see. But it's using a Breeze Dark style theme right here for everything now, just colors. Now, the problem with this approach is that this gdk.css file, it does not support the native Libadwaita light/dark mode switching. As you can see here, I'm switching between light and dark mode, and it just is stuck on Breeze Dark here. And a lot of people just only use the light theme or only use the dark theme, but for me, that's actually a really bad issue because my laptop has really bad glare. And so I mostly use light mode on my laptop because I can actually read stuff on it with the glare that the laptop screen has. But when I'm working at night, I have to have dark mode or my eyes get destroyed. So for me, that's a huge problem. Now let me delete this. Now there also used to be a tool called Gradients for doing this, but that tool is no longer developed. I did Google Gradients alternatives to see if I could find a GUI replacement for theming Libadwaita apps, but I could not. So if I just couldn't find one and there is one, comment it below and I'll pin it. Or if like in the future there becomes one, I'll pin it too. The point is though, the foundation is already there in order to have a coloring API. All you have to do, like I said, is expose these already defined named colors into an API that platforms like stillOS or Ubuntu or Manjaro can actually theme. And then the distro is able to have its own distinct identity again without breaking things. Now, GNOME apps will try and argue, this will break my app, this will break my app. As long as any CSS changes you make use a defined color instead of a hard-coded color, this will not break your app. And even if it does, I'm not going to lie, that is a problem with Libadwaita at this point because Google has been doing something similar with Material U. This generates a full-on color theme from your wallpaper, and I haven't seen any instances of certain color schemes just breaking Material U apps. I haven't seen that once. And by breaking apps, there are some apps where Material U just doesn't work, but I haven't seen a screenshot of an app where the color scheme used just doesn't work on the app and breaks it. With that said, a recoloring API is just the logical solution for fixing the brand identity problem that GNOME-based Linux distros have. Now, this isn't a problem for GNOME, like the GNOME desktop is pretty recognizable due to the fact that they hardcode the theme. But this is still a huge brand identity crisis that a lot of Linux distributions have. And in terms of marketing for a Linux distribution, adding a recoloring API would be such a huge plus because then distros like Ubuntu, distros like Manjaro, even distros like Zorin OS can actually brand their GNOME apps without breaking things. So with that said, GNOME, come on, add a color API to Libadwaita. Like, just do it. I don't see a reason not to. Stop being stubborn. I actually have been reading GNOME developers saying that they're going to add this since Libadwaita has came out, and I just don't get why they haven't just done it yet. It doesn't seem that difficult to add, but this is just a huge problem that GNOME-based distros have to deal with right now. Even non-GNOME distros have to deal with this. Like, if they added this, Plasma could actually make it so GNOME apps are a little bit better integrated into Plasma. Yeah, they wouldn't have the Breeze style sheet, but at least they would share whatever Breeze color scheme you have set. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, you might like my video talking about stillOS, which I'm going to put right here. And I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of May. So hit the sub button right here to help me do that, please. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.